Following the impeachment trial, House Democrats say they're creating a bipartisan commission to investigate the Capitol riot. The 9/11 style commission will examine administrative and law enforcement failures. It also plans to highlight the role of those responsible for inciting the insurrection and make recommendations to prevent future attacks. It comes as an extensive new report by ProPublica takes a deeper look at the harrowing experiences of several police officers who were tasked with defending the Capitol on January 6th. Interviews with 19 current and former members of the Capitol Police give a glimpse into the breakdown of leadership that left law enforcement vastly unprepared against the rioters, reporting, quote, "To many of them, it felt like no one was in charge of the Capitol's defense. All they could hear on the police radio were desperate cries for help." ProPublica's senior reporting fellow, Josh Kaplan, is one of the authors of that report, and he joins me now. Josh, thanks very much for being here. You know, we've all seen the video and photos from that day, but the descriptions from the officers on the front lines really add another dimension to what we know. Describe for us the experience level of some of those officers, and what is it they thought about what they witnessed on January 6th?
So, I mean, on the West Front, which was the most intense battle of that day, I don't think it's really easy to tell from the video just how bad it got. They were being attacked with metal pipes, baseball bats, American flag poles. They were having, being sprayed in the face with bear spray, having rebar and power tools thrown at them, frozen cans of food. At a point they got cornered, and it crossed through several of these officers' minds. They thought that they were going to die. And they, feel grateful they made it out alive, but feel they were left out to dry by the department's leadership.
And I think, Josh, for me reading this, one of the things that was particularly striking was the fact that some of these officers have experience in combat and still felt woefully unprepared for what they encountered that day.
Yeah, so one of the officers who was on the riot squad that became the first line of defense is a veteran and had served overseas in combat, and he said that that was nothing like what he experienced on January 6th.
Well, officers told you that they received no warning of a serious threat of violence before the Capitol attack, but your reporting found the intelligence did exist. So why wasn't it passed on?
It's a very good question, and that's so. Part of that has to do with longstanding problems in the department, where officers feel that they've been asking for years for information about upcoming events, and went into January 6th like it was any other day, even though the intelligence division of the force knew that the Proud Boys were going to be there, knew that white supremacists were going to be there, knew that people were likely to be armed. But even in the intelligence reports, there were serious inconsistencies in what was going out. The daily intel reports, which we obtained and are widely distributed across the commanders of the force, even those didn't mention these kind of grave aspects of the January 6th rally. They said that, all that they said, not the extremists, not the weapons, was that folks could organize a demonstration on U.S. Capitol Police grounds. And they actually, and these widely disseminated intelligence reports actually score the January 6th rally of having a 20 to 45% chance of resulting in arrests, which is the same score that they gave to two small anti-Trump counter demonstrations that day.
I really learned a lot, Josh, in reading your piece about how it is that Capitol Police are organized and sort of the division of labor and work. Beyond the problems with passing along and acting on intelligence, you also found that there were issues with equipment and coordination, really sort of basic issues that go back well before January. Tell us what you found.
Right. So going into January 6th, many of the officers didn't have helmets, many didn't have gas masks, most hadn't received training on how to respond to a riot in years. Kind of through this tragic coincidence, actually, several weeks before the riot, a lot of officers were ordered to return their helmets because they were so old and they were never replaced in time. And then,
like the padding was coming out. I thought that was such an
Mhm.
interesting detail. That's an example of just how old some of the gear that they had in their possession was. It was just that old.
Absolutely. And then even the people who did have gear, who were prepared, um, were weren't able to use the equipment they did have because of serious communication failures the day of. So these riot squads that are kind of equipped to fend off blows and be able to, deal with this sort of violence. Um, One of them actually received instructions to leave their gear on a bus going into the riot. And then once things started to go south on January 6th, they got separated from it. So one of these, kind of specialized teams that was meant to be the first line of defense in this sort of catastrophe had to go through the day completely unprotected as they're fending off attacks with baseball bats.
It was really remarkable to read that. And also the way that you lay it out, you have, as I understand it, what, 4 divisions essentially that were assigned to the protection of the Capitol, but they didn't seem to talk to each other based on what you found.
Right. So they operate largely in silos, these 4 main divisions, and they're even though they are all tasked with dealing with the Capitol complex, they have their own leadership structure. They make some of their own decisions. There used to be weekly intelligence briefings where all of the division commanders would come together and discuss upcoming events, but those briefings stopped years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes you wonder how you can have situational awareness in a situation like that, where you have these silos that are literally cutting off information flow to all the folks who are on the front lines. So Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund resigned a day after the riot. And in an 8-page letter, he said, quote, "I wish we had had better intelligence and warnings as to the possibility of this type of military-style armed insurrection. The entire intelligence community seems to have missed this." So Josh, what is his side of the story here?
Right. So Chief Sund, both in his letter to Congress and to us, I think the big picture of what he's saying is that he did the best he could with the information he had. This was first and foremost an intelligence failure, and that he prepared the department for this sort of protest that he was expecting. He did increase security measures, but had no idea that what happened was even a possibility. And he is pointing that not just on the Capitol Police's intelligence division, but also on all the other agencies that they interact with: the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Secret Service. And so he's saying that he tried to get the National Guard there. He was shut down. He increased security measures, but had no idea, according to him, what could be coming.
So what's been sort of the fallout here for Capitol Police in the wake of the insurrection? Because we've heard stories about absolute burnout at this point, emotional fatigue, physical fatigue. The hours that they are continuing to work in the wake of this really have just not lent themselves to healing or reflecting or kind of recovering from what was essentially a battle, a pitched battle that you describe in your piece. What's been the fallout for Capitol Police?
Yeah, I mean, they're exhausted, they're disappointed. About 70 Capitol Police officers were injured that day. One officer, Brian Sicknick, passed away the day afterwards. And they're dealing with a lot of trauma with what they saw, what they went through, and feel like they were let down by the people who are in charge of making sure the Capitol is safe. And from what we've heard, quite a few of them are considering retirement or looking for new jobs, and they just don't really feel confidence right now that the people above them are going to do what it takes to protect them and bring them home safe at the end of the day.
Well, it's clearly an eye-opening, sobering report. Really important reporting for people to understand, as I said, the dimensions of what exactly took place in addition to that video that we saw. ProPublica's Josh Kaplan. Josh, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me on.